Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Thursday's edition. I'm back in the good old USA. Happy to be with you today. Jeffrey, happy to have you back with me, and thank you for guest hosting the show while I was away.
Well, I got to tell you, being asked the questions is a lot easier than asking the questions.
Well, again, thanks for filling in for me while I was gone. I also want to thank my other guest hosts that filled in. I know Dutch was here on the show, Joe, Dan, some of my regulars. So listen, I just want to thank you guys for helping out while I was overseas. And we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But Jeffrey, I can share one thing with you from being overseas in the perspective of the news from Asia versus being here in this country. It's sort of remarkable, and I'll get into that as we go through the show. But let's hit on some topics about things that are happening now, because again, coming back to the States, the more things get weirder, it just is incredible to me. And people across Asia are looking at what's going on in the United States, and frankly, they're shaking their heads. Let's hit topic of the day. Okay.
Weirder is the perfect term.
Well, let's talk about a couple things. Just the sheer craziness of things going on. You had an article in LidBlog talking about RFK. Elaborate that a little bit for some of our audience, because free speech, it seems to be everywhere, and people are attacking everybody.
Well, first of all, the guy's a lunatic, okay? He says the weirdest things, and he believes he can talk to the dead, okay? I mean, like the movie that Bruce Willis a couple of years ago. But the thing is, there's a difference between free speech. He can say anything he wants, but that doesn't mean he has to be given the platform of the Congress or the platform of TV. That has nothing to do with free speech.
Well, I'll agree with you, but the issues, I don't see the issue as RFK Jr. I see the issue is who are the people enabling this type of conversation to take place? I mean, honest to God, I'm sitting here overseas and I'm saying, Congress is holding hearings on UFOs. And I'm going, what? I'm actually thinking this.
Well, I mean, the thing is, and you know who the craziest people are? He has 15% of the Democratic vote. They're the craziest.
What's his alternative? The other 85%?
Is actually is 5% for someone else, and then the other 80% is for Biden. But Biden is senile. This guy's crazy. He's nuts. Okay, I mean, forget the vaccine stuff. I mean, a lot of people have that opinion, but some of his other opinions, you know, just are give me the chills. You know,
well, let me give you a good medicine to help cure your chills. The chance of RFK Jr. being the Democratic nominee is slim and none, and none's left, the room. So I don't think at the end of the day this is going to be even the smallest minutia of an issue, because at the end of the day, the way things stand politically right now, we're going to have a race with President Joe Biden against former President Donald Trump and possibly a candidate from No Labels in Joe Manchin or somebody else. That's how this race is shaping up right now, and not one thing has changed in the 3 weeks I've been gone.
Yeah, but whatchamacallit, Biden, I mean, what's his name? Romney was trailing way behind at this point when he was nominated. So things could change. It's a lot, and face it, Kennedy is in the front car of the crazy train.
Things change. I get it. But one thing that has not changed in politics, when you're up by 50 or 60, you're not going to lose that lead. That's too much. But let me move on to something I think is more substantive than RFK. And I'm going to talk about the current occupant of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, who claimed that he Again, folks, you can go to LidBlog for this article. He's the one who has ended cancer as we know it. Now, Jeffrey, I was on the plane when this came about. What exactly did Biden say? I have seen the quip subsequently.
For Biden, cancer is a big issue because that's how his son died. Even though he keeps saying his son died in Afghanistan, his son died of brain cancer, and I understand why it would be a big issue for him. But these are exact words. He said that I cure cancer, and he said, that's one of his big things that he did. Well, according to the American Cancer Society, in 2023, their projection, there would be almost 2 million new cancer cases. This is part of, let's face it, it's an election thing. He keeps coming up with more and more fake things to show that he should be reelected. And that's certainly, well, I don't know if it's a fake, if you look at the original transcript, it wasn't in there. So I don't know if it was something he added or something that was, his lack of mental capabilities because of dementia.
Well, let me give you some commentary on that. Right now, Jeffrey, and we're sort of getting into the political current state of affairs right now. From an overseas view, obviously keeping up with events as they were happening in the U.S., to me, this race has come down to the following. Joe Biden is going to be the Democratic nominee unless something happens in the criminal probe of the Biden crime family that Representative Comer and his committee uncover additional links through some of these shell companies that specifically show bribes went into Biden. Evidence sends it a lean that way, but it's not conclusive at this point. Secondly, unless something horrific happens to Donald Trump, and I'm not talking 1 or 2 more indictments because I think that's likely, Donald Trump stands ready to be the Republican nominee with or without a trial happening. And
well,
I know
this
80% of the, and well, let me finish. 80% of the American public does not want to see this.
Yep.
But that's where it's trending right now. Now, again, you and I have seen leads change, but from what's happening on the Democratic side, they're not going to put any of their other stars like Gretchen Whitmer, the California governor, Gavin Newsom. They're not going to step up and ruin their political careers by going after Joe Biden unless the hierarchs and donors in the Democratic Party say Biden's got to go, he can't win. That's possible. We still have time for that to happen. But all I'm saying is at this point in the case where we are now, that's not the likely scenario. On our side of the ledger, again, Donald Trump's leading 40 points. Now, again, if there's going to be any changes, I think it's more likely on our side of the aisle, not the Democratic side. Could moderate Republicans or some Trump supporters fall off if there's additional indictments? Maybe. But that hasn't been the case so far. So that's how I see it. Now, a lot of people are crying about no labels. They're saying, oh, no labels, we'll hand it to Trump. No, that's not the case. No Labels doesn't have a candidate yet. They say they're going to run a Republican and a Democrat on the same ticket. Democrats are claiming that'll take away votes from Biden. Jeffrey, the more this race changes, the more it stays the same. And let me relate back to this. You and I have talked about this for 6 months. This race is going to come down to 8 swing states. We can pretend that that's not true, but that is what's going to happen. And to the degree that the Manchin or whomever could influence those 8, maybe 9 state elections, that's going to determine the winner. The other 41, 42 states, It doesn't matter. They're going to go red or they're going to go blue. You and I could could literally take a crayon on a map and draw it in, and it's going to be the same. So, folks, I hate to be the bearer of good news or bad news. It's really not no news, to be honest with you. For all this political back and forth, the culture wars, the this, the that, the finger pointing, this race is remarkably stable.
You know, what most people don't realize is this is not a national election. It's 50 state elections.
Right.
Or as Obama used to say, 57 state elections.
Yeah.
But I still say during the debates, the national debates, this might be the first time where each candidate is wearing an ankle bracelet. And I'd like to see that, you know, but according to Real Clear Politics, Biden has a 0.9 lead, but that's been going back and forth for the last couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. We won't know. We really won't know. It's too close. And it'll be too close to Election Day.
And I'm agreeing with you 100%, Jeffrey. I mean, while I was in Vietnam, I saw polling that I think a Harvard poll came out, and it showed President Trump over President Biden by like 4 points. Now, the RCP average, Real Clear Politics, like you're talking about, it's basically even, folks. So I do believe
9%.
that the no labels is going to have an effect on the race. Until you could actually put a candidate out there, I can't quantify my commentary on that until we actually see something like that. But what I do know is this, Jeffrey, sort of shifting subjects a little bit. Though the economic numbers that came out, where the gross domestic product of this country grew 2.4%, and I know there's been a lot of economists forecasting that the U.S. will go into recession in Q3 or Q4. Well, Q3 is a little bit too late. We're in Q3 right now. You don't go from 2.4% growth to negative growth in one quarter. So those negative naysayers, if you will, their best hope is Q4 of this year or Q1 of 2024. Let's play out a couple scenarios here. I don't see a recession in this country, zero chance of it in Q3. Frankly, I'm not seeing a lot of indications it could happen in Q4. Now, the Fed did hike interest rates at its recent meeting by 25 basis points. These interest rates right now are at their highest level in 22 years. But it doesn't seem to be having an effect materially on the slowing down the economy. So, Jeffrey, if let me finish my point. If Republicans were in office right now, they would be screaming how well the economy's doing. And it is doing well. And they'd be taking credit for it. But the issue with Joe Biden and the Democrats is all the policies that he advocates take the economy the wrong way. And that's where the crux of the issue. The public is not giving the Biden administration any credit for what's going on with the overall growth of the U.S. economy, because frankly, those policies Biden's didn't have anything to do with the growth. And the Federal Reserve policies have way more effect on that than anything the administration's done.
Yep. And the Fed said this is it. It's not going up again.
Well, that's not exactly what they said. Specifically, what they said was they're going to look at the data over the next two meetings. You know, they have two more meetings coming up, and based upon what that data shows, they'll determine, you know, whether they're going to keep rates the same or if they have to be further raises.
Well, when they announced that, I went to my gas stove, I made some coffee, I put it in a coffee cup, I turned on my water heater that they hate, and I got into my big truck that gets 10 miles to a gallon, and it made me feel a little better.
Well, it may have made you feel a little bit better, but driving into the studio today, Jeffrey, every gas station I passed was $5 to $5.25 for a gallon of gasoline here in Southern California. I don't know what it is in New York, but you know, that's where prices are here right now, and I don't sense that they're going to be going down.
I think they're going to start inching up.
Okay, so let me play out a scenario for you. Let's say gas prices start going up. Okay, let's say wages keep going up. Okay, if those are the cases and you get a higher inflation number, you're going to see the Fed raise rates again. Now, I'm not going to bake that in at this point because I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball looking any further than the Federal Reserve, and they have thousands of crystal balls I don't have access to. But just taking the man on the street test, from being over in Asia for 3 weeks, and I come back, gas prices are $5 a gallon. It's summer, it's hot. The economy grew at 2.4, that's good. And when I look at my news through my phone or my computer, all the issues that I see pop up are social issues or culture issues. Jeffrey, help me out with this while I was gone 3 weeks. What the hell's going on in this country?
You take a look at the inflation. Look at what industries are going up the most. Okay, and that's the staple issues. That's what is the food you're going to put on the table? And to everyone who has children, that's the number one thing. How do I feed my family, my kids? Education is going up high. How do I get my kids educated? Okay, that's the important stuff. And those are still going up too high.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't disagree with you. But at the end of the day, the inflation numbers have come down from a peak of 9.3% about a year ago, and now we have inflation hovering around 3%, still above the Fed's target range of 2%. But the core, Jeffrey, which excludes volatile food and energy, is still in that 4 to 5 range, which is really a high number, but it's coming down. So how would you, question from me to you, how would you rate the state of affairs in the U.S. economy now from the last time we spoke 3 weeks ago?
I think that it's probably flat. But I think that if I was a Republican broadcaster, what I would say is that Biden keeps comparing the rates to his rates. Yes, it is way down from 9%, but it's still higher than Trump had. Trump is at 1%. Yes, gas went down, but gas was at $2.20 when Trump was president. So he's kind of mixing up the numbers, and nobody's talking about that. My other thing is, I would love for one person in the White House reporters to say, let me ask you something. What exactly is a MAGA Republican? Tell me how you come up with that number. So I mean, because if they ask Biden that, it's going to be blah, 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 blah. He's not going to know.
Yeah.
It's what his people write.
Yeah, I get where you're coming from there. In other words, the Democratic Party has this belief that MAGA is synonymous with racist, homophobe, bigot, just anything negative. So they basically are trying to use. Yeah. So I guess my point is this: what they're trying to do in the influence of controlling the message is referring to all Republicans as a MAGA Republican, thinking people believe MAGA is a bad word, when in actuality, roughly 50% of the Republican Party identify themselves as MAGA Republicans. So it's like you're insulting me, calling me who I am. Well, okay, do it at your own peril. So I don't think that's a very good strategy, to be honest with you.
My problem with that is the Republican Party doesn't fight back. Because to me, MAGA means America first, patriotism, low oil price, things like that. It doesn't mean racism. I don't know someone who supported Trump that was racist. Ask my black Republican friends. I don't know one that was anti-Semitic.
You're hitting the crux of the issue. The issue is Democrats are trying to paint, quote, MAGA Republicans as this bad word. And MAGA Republicans are saying, hey, wait a minute, I'll embrace it. That's where this cultural clash I see, Jeffrey, is ongoing and maybe getting worse. Yeah. So,
but the party's not fighting it.
I don't know about that. I'm not on the same page as you there. I think that Donald Trump is, and I think the section of the Republican Party that's not Trump is trying to unseat Trump. I mean, look, he's garnering 50% of the vote, and the other 8 candidates are sharing the rest of it. And DeSantis may be up, Ramaswamy may be up, Tim Scott up, down, but collectively, the sum total of the rest of the Republican field equals Trump. So until that dynamic changes, Jeffrey, the White House can brand MAGA Republicans all they want. At the end of the day, if things don't change, and again, things are always changing in politics, but if Trump faces further indictments based upon history, those people are not leaving Trump. So you tell me, at this point, it's still Trump's race to lose.
Well, I think DeSantis has some real problems. I mean, he fired half his staff yesterday.
Saw that.
That to me says he's got some problems.
Well, politics is an up and down game. And on our side of the ledger, right now, based upon polling data, which is suspect at times, but we can say that DeSantis is in second position. Statistically, that's true. But when you're 30 to 35 down, again, everybody in the DeSantis campaign, and I know a few people close advisors to him, they did not expect to be where they are now when they started their campaign. I can assure you of that. Now, there's still time to turn it around. Remember this, Jeffrey, and this is why when people write politicians' obituaries, I sort of laugh at it. When Joe Biden, I'm going back just the most recent election, remember when he came out and he came in like 4th or 5th in the Iowa caucuses, got drummed out of Nevada, I think he came in 4th there, went up to New Hampshire, and I think he came in 5th. He left the state on his plane before they even had the votes announced. Flew down to South Carolina. So the first 3 voting contests, he came in like 4th, and 5th. Yet he won South Carolina. They all folded, and he became the nominee and the president. So to write the political obituary in the summer, 6 months before we've ever had a vote cast, sorry, I'm not buying that in any party.
But I'm seeing some support for Scott moving up. I hear a lot of people saying, gee, if it's not Trump, I would like to see it be Tim Scott. Or I would like Tim Scott to be Trump's VP. Because obviously it's not going to be Pence. But I hear people.
If you go back to a show that you and I discussed, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 months ago, I told you that I thought Tim Scott was running for vice president, not president.
Right.
That was a comment I made. It would not shock me at all if he was in that position. But let me throw this little set out to you. While I was overseas, I was looking at some polls. Ramaswamy at one point, I saw he was at 9%. If I was in his shoes, I'd be ecstatic at those numbers. Look, we're going to have a debate coming up in a few weeks on the Republican side. It's going to send a clear message who qualifies and who doesn't qualify for that debate. It appears to me that while I was away last 3 weeks, the 2 individuals not named Trump who have done reasonably well are Tim Scott and Ramaswamy. So if I'm a young voter in the party and I'm looking at these candidates, I look at one guy who's in his late 30s, who is a biotech billionaire, who's made something out of his life and has done very well, and he's up to like 9% now, or 8, whatever. I look at Tim Scott, he's bouncing around 5, 6%. So is there hope? Yes. I look at Ron DeSantis. His poll numbers sort of look like a heart monitor of a deceased person. It just never changes. It flatlines at 20. Now, the good news, bad news, he's still the second choice. He still has money. Not one vote's been cast and won't be for another 6 months. So there's time.
There's a lot of time. But in Iowa and New Hampshire, he's not doing that great as he is in the rest of the country.
Yeah.
What we've been saying all along, Iowa, New Hampshire, and South Carolina, that's going to determine the nomination.
Maybe a little bit more, but again, that's conventional wisdom. Usually happens.
That's when the money stops. If you don't win any of them.
If you don't, you have to do something prior to Super Tuesday, or your dollars will. We got a couple minutes left, Jeffrey. Let me ask you a couple things. I want to talk about these. What the heck is going on with this Hunter Biden situation? I mean, everybody was expecting that this guy was going to go into court, plea deals accepted, the case is washed away, but the judge didn't do that. Share with our audience your perspective on what's really going on here.
Like I said, I think both lawyers should be thrown out, because how do you not know what the amnesty is? The prosecution thought the amnesty was just for what he was pleading guilty on. Hunter's attorneys thought it was like forever. Even after he died, he'd have amnesty. And that's wrong, because
of course it's wrong.
They're still looking at him. They even said yesterday for the international stuff, they're looking at him. Every day, there's a little more we find out about Hunter and his daddy. Okay, it's like a drip, 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 which is worse than finding it all out at once. But the thing is that the big lie from Biden, he might not have done anything wrong, but he keeps saying, I had no involvement with his business. And he has. Yeah. That's been proven. And that's the big lie. And that's what America's going to remember. He lied to us. Even if he's innocent of all the other stuff, he lied to us.
Yeah. I think that the media and their allies in the Democratic Party were really hoping this Hunter Biden thing would go away. And I think the judge exercised good judicial prudence by not accepting it, and for good reason.
And she really
they were basically trying to let him plead to a gun charge when he literally owed hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in back taxes. They were trying to give him blanket immunity for crimes that are still under investigation. So, I mean, this should have been the outcome, and thank goodness it was. But at the end of the day, it just, as you correctly characterized it, drip, 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 and it's going to continue. And again, I submit to you, like I said earlier in the show, unless there's more concrete evidence tying Hunter into Joe, there's going to be a lot of this going on conservative media circles. Anyhow, I'm glad I got your thoughts on that.
We're seeing real evidence. We're seeing a audio tape where Hunter is talking about Burisma, and he says, "You got to do what I want to because my dad's right here." Okay, was he there? I don't know, but he said he was there. And Burisma is one of the things that we know he got involved in because he bragged about it. That he says, "I told them if they don't do what I want, they won't get. If they don't fire this guy who is investigating Hunter, I won't give you the $1 billion of aid."
Yeah, that's old news.
Yeah. But he bragged about it. There's a lot of evidence he worked with China. That's scary. China's an existential threat.
Well, you've given me a perfect segue to sort of close the show out here, Jeffrey. Got a couple minutes left, and I do want to share some thoughts with our audience. I had a chance to visit Asia. That's where I've been for the last 3 weeks. Spent a considerable amount of that time in Vietnam, small amount of time in Korea. But mentioning China, China sort of dominates the region. Now, let me give our audience a little perspective here. Vietnam is a beautiful country. Had a chance to go through a large part of the country. Americans would be shocked at the growth and innovation happening in Southeast Asia.
Yep.
A lot of Americans still have the view of what things were like when the war was going on. Okay, there are parts of the country that sort of look the way it did 50, 60, 70 years ago. and then you can go one block away and you see glistening skyscrapers, ultra modern shops, restaurants, you name it, spectacular, beautiful beaches. And in Korea, the technology, it's just astounding. The Korean airports make the United States airports look like we're a third world country. But let me tie anything back to China, what you're talking about. It's crystal clear to me China's effort to dominate the region, and as such, further spread their influence around the globe. While I was away, China announced that it had replaced its foreign minister that was just appointed recently. The former prime minister is now the current prime minister. That would be the equivalent in our country of Secretary Blinken, of Joe Biden appointing Secretary Blinken's assistant to the top job, and 6 months later removing him and reinstating Blinken. Why this is happening, we don't really know why they did it, but they did. But she is viewed quite favorably in the region, but with a lot of, shall we say, concern because of the historical nature of China trying to dominate the region. So whatever you're seeing about China, and believe me, the people in Southeast Asia see Chinese efforts to secure oil, Chinese efforts to build islands, Chinese military expansion, the constant risk of invading Taiwan. And then you couple that with Kim Jong-un up in North Korea. I mean, I'm sitting here in Seoul, not very far from Pyongyang, and we had the issue break of the American military guy who ran across the DMZ and is now in North Korea. So I mean, there's constant tension throughout that region, whether it be North Korea or whether it be China, and that's not going to change anytime here in the near future. But make no mistake about it, Jeffrey, it is crystal clear of China's effort to spread its influence on a global basis. And I can assure you this too, in Chinese President Xi's best case scenario, that Chinese yuan would replace the dollar during our lifetime, Jeffrey.
Well, keep in mind that, again, when Trump was president, China was scared of us. And so was the dude with the lousy haircut, North Korea. Okay. Just today, Indonesia announced that they're going to have a closer relationship with China. Yeah. So it's happening. What you said is happening.
Yeah. Okay. We got about a minute left, and let me close it out on this, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit of humor here. All right, so in Vietnam, and to a degree Korea, but I didn't spend as much time there, Donald Trump is revered. I mean, he is viewed very favorably among the Vietnamese people specifically, because that's where I spent the vast majority of my time. And I'll give you, folks, this is just funny. I just got to share it with you on a closing comment here. Okay, so at some of the hotels we stayed at, I spent a little time at the pool. Maybe they had a lot of chlorine in the pool. Anyhow, my light brown hair, became blonde. And I will kid you not, I was in 3 different cabs where the cab driver looked at me and he says, "You look like Mr. Trump." He says, "Can I take a picture with you?" I kid you not, this is not a bit, this has actually happened where cab drivers took pictures of me and a cab driver that they wanted to take home to their sons or daughters and say that Donald Trump was riding in the cab. Folks, I don't think I look like Trump, but a lot of Vietnamese looked at me and they thought when I had that blonde hair that I looked like Trump. He is very favorably viewed. So for our conservative audience, if Donald Trump was running against Joe Biden and it was only people in Vietnam that were voting, despite the fact it's a communist government that's acting like capitalists, Donald Trump would win an election by 70 points. So anyhow, funny news to close it out. Jeffrey, I always ask you, and I'll give you a final word here, how do you see things going? You got 30 seconds.
I think that the next week, when we find out more about Trump, because he's talking to the special prosecutor as we talk, that's going to be some big news.
Yeah.
I also think that the drip, drip, drip is going to be big news because it keeps getting big. Yeah. And I mean, I have seen it get Biden, Joe, more and more involved.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And like I said, he's keeping to the big lie. that I never touched his business, which, like I said, it's gonna damage his relationship with the American people more than anything. But
Well,
just to add what you said, I'm on the phone with Israel every day. They love Trump more than anybody.
yeah.
The
So
problem is that Trump's got to be as popular in the United States.
yeah, he's more popular abroad than he is at home. All right, Jeffrey, we got to close it out there. Thanks again for hosting while I was gone. Thanks for chatting with me today on Thursday. And folks, I do want to close it out with this. Again, thank all my guest hosts, but I also want to give you this perspective. The United States, we're a great country. When you see how everybody else across the globe lives, you know, there's 6.5 billion people in this world, 330 million are here in the US, and to a person, every person I spoke to of American overseas was always happy to get back in the great US of A. Thanks again for viewing and listening today, folks. We will be back on Tuesday. We'll be tackling these issues, and when I speak to you next Thursday, Jeffrey, we'll add a little bit of clarity to some of the confusion today. Thanks for viewing. Thanks for listening. See you next week, folks.
See you next week.